advise them and give them the context of the local and things like that. So yeah, it was very interesting to hear from the people directly from themselves.
How did you get us onto Facebook even before the show has started, Messi? This is supposed to be our Facebook free time, right?
No, I actually have been trying not to get to that. You know that I have been on the other side of Tyler's support, but fair is fair. So if they are doing something to make things better, it is good to point that out. So I was actually impressed by the person, what they are doing on the ground, and working with not just the government, but the person. They are hiring full-time staff, getting the local context and other things. So, and watch out what I'm going to hear today. Today, I'm already here as well. There is another full day of big guys here, like Safaricom, Nokia, Huawei, all those big guys, what they are doing for the digital economy in Africa and particularly in Ethiopia. So it is quite interesting to hear it directly from their mouths. So that's why I had to say it.
So now I see what Cheryl was trying to tell me.
Your mic seems a little bit low right now, Tyler.
Too low?
It could be my ears because they've been ringing the past couple of days, but it sounds a bit far.
It should be okay. Anyone else feel that I'm too far, too low? Let me know.
Yeah, he's still far, isn't he?
I sound far?
Does he sound far to you as well, Messi?
Yeah.
Like a tin can.
Yeah.
Like a what?
A tin can.
Like a tin can. Oh, that's not. Oh, I see the problem here. Here we go. Hold on. How about now?
Better.
Much better.
There we go.
Got it.
We were on the wrong microphone. Okay, thank you. So I see what Cheryl was trying to say, that my man Jason Calacanis, at Jason on Twitter and on Instagram, has started this thing called This Week in Startups Meetups, events for founders by founders. The goal of the Twist Meetups is to connect founders in their cities. Free gatherings, 100% organized by the founders. And so there was one in Los Angeles, and then there was one in New York, and then in London, and today there was one in Tokyo. And then the upcoming ones are in Austin and Boston and Chicago, San Francisco, DC, Sydney, Miami, and Philly. And so, and now I see all the details here.
How about Ethiopia?
Yeah, how many This Week in Startups listeners are in Ethiopia? That's a good question.
I can mobilize them, Tyler. That's not an excuse.
So now I see where they met. They met at a really cool, venue near my old stomping grounds. Literally a hop down the street from where I spent many of my days there near Roppongi Hills Zoo in Tokyo.
That's right.
Yeah. How many people were there, Cheryl?
Supposed to be 10, but I think 2 of them were late. They don't turn out, I don't know. But anyway, we finished already, so bye-bye.
And were you speaking in Japanese or in English?
Okay, I try, there is a majority Japanese. I try to speak Japanese and English, but I encourage them to speak English because they want to bring their business overseas. And then there's one who tried to speak Mandarin with me because he's from China.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah. Okay. Because it's not that hard for me to fly. You know how much I love Tokyo. I would love to start doing my monthly events in Tokyo. And we could build up.
Yay! I'll be your co-organizer.
Okay, that could work because I have some important friends in Tokyo who could help bring a lot of attention to it and everything.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that could be good.
Tyler, what about your other adopted place, Stockholm? How come they didn't have a startup there? get together?
Oh, the This Weekend Startups event there? I don't know. I don't know who
Tyler is in trouble. Every country complaining.
But you know what, Tyler?
Oh,
Jason
I'm
said
in
he will
England,
not do
so.
Sweden because Tyler Crowley is there.
Is that what he said?
Yep, that's what he said. He's a buddy.
I don't know. So, well, hasn't really been possible to do meetups, during COVID or whatever in most places, but now that we're coming out of it, we can. Anyway, I still do the monthly events in Sweden and would love to do them in other cities, especially my favorite cities like Tokyo and in India would be amazing too. Anyway, let's do
Tyler, if you
yes.
want to do it in India, in Hyderabad, I could try to reach out to the first secretary and ask him if let me know if you want to do that.
I think it would need to be in Bangalore.
Tyler, we are having one in mid-December in Islamabad. If any of you interested, that's going to be a big event. Last 2019, we had it like about 25,000 people actually attended. So that's the biggest tech event of Pakistan. So we'd love to have you and many other people.
Is it COVID-free? I mean, a fully vaccinated event? Because we had one similar sort of thing, but you had to show your passport, your vaccination passport, or your PCR negative evidence.
Okay, here we go. Let's jump into the news, the hot news headlines here. The top story, by the way, happy Thursday, everybody. Tomorrow's Friday. And let's get into the air. Where's the air horn? It's not official without that sound. Here we go. Top stories from the New York Times. Facebook tells employees, all of them, it sent out a company-wide email, which got leaked to the New York Times. And the email is telling employees to preserve internal documents and communications related to its business since 2016, as governments and legislative bodies begin inquiries. And that makes sense because last time we met 12 hours ago, we read headlines that the FTC is now going to investigate Facebook to see if Facebook was violating the terms of their previous issue with the $5 billion fine. And Facebook has already answered that question. They understand why the investigation is happening now. It's a result of the Frances Haugen whistleblowing, and basically the Senate subcommittees telling the FTC, "Hey, FTC, could you please investigate Facebook to see if they are in violation of the agreement around the settlement of the previous issue? Did they actually know? Did they lie? Were they being deceitful?" is the question. And Facebook has already responded saying, no, we're not deceitful at all. What that whistleblower is reporting is documents that the entire company has access to. That's why she was able to get them. She was getting documents from Instagram she doesn't work at. Those documents are available to everybody in the whole company. We have a radically open structure in our company where everyone has access to everything. All 60,000 employees across the different companies. Oculus, WhatsApp, Instagram, the Blue app, Facebook. We have a radically open, transparent company. We do lots of research all the time. Thousands and thousands and thousands of studies all the time. And some studies show this, some studies show that, some studies show people are lizards, some studies show the world's are everyone's an Illuminati. There's all kinds of crazy studies, and you've cherry picked out, single data points out of single studies from 5 years ago, and we've got plenty of other studies that counter what the cherry picked points that you're now being exposed to by Frances Haugen, who didn't work at those companies, yada yada yada. So, long story short, no, there's no intentional deceit here, and we can easily prove that. So just so you know, go ahead, feel free, do the investigation. And hey, this is the headline today from the New York Times. We're now telling all the employees, hey, we're going to make sure that you preserve all documents for the past 7 years, because normally when there's investigations like that, that is a very normal time frame where a federal investigator will say, please keep all documents for the past 7 years, because we're going to do an audit. We're going to look at everything. We're going to do an investigation. So Facebook is telling everybody in all of the Facebook empire to to facilitate that investigation by preserving all internal documents, because if you start deleting documents, now you look guilty. So please don't be deleting any old documents off of your machines. It's a really incredibly simple ask. Don't be deleting documents at this point. And there it is. Makes sense. They want to comply with the investigation. Of course they do, because no doubt this is going to be stupid. This is a complete waste of time. Facebook is going to very easily be able to demonstrate that Frances Haugen was running into, was sharing stuff beyond her knowledge, and none of the documents that she shared were directly relevant to her role in the company. And that tells you everything you need to know, that they have nothing on Facebook. So we're gonna watch the FTC investigation ongoing, and it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. It'll be interesting to see how the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal continue to try and pour gas on that non-existent dumpster fire. I'll predict it right now. I'm even happy to take wagers on this issue that Facebook will be found to not be in violation, and this whole thing will be a big charade. So, the next article is that Spotify had their Q3 earnings report. They did very, very well. The stock jumped like 9% as a result. And the headline today says, as part of their Q3 stock report, they also mentioned that we are now the most used podcasting platform in the United States, which used to be Apple. That was Apple's main claim for a very long time. And that was true for a very long time. Apple was the main podcasting app because they invented podcasting. It came from, the whole concept of having an iPod and sending audio to an iPod. That's what podcasting is all about. So it's not a surprise that they were the leader, because they built the hardware. So Spotify now says, we are now the top podcasting app. And so the headline here says that Spotify cites Edison Research and its own internal data to claim it, quote unquote, recently became the most used podcast platform in the US. And this is from TechCrunch, who seems to be doubting Spotify's claims that they are now the top podcasting app. And so TechCrunch is asking Spotify, on what basis do you now assert that you have the most popular podcasting app? And Spotify said, we used what's called Edison Research and our own data. So it says in September, analysts predicted Spotify was poised to overtake Apple Podcast in the U.S. listenership. Today, Spotify announced for the first time that it may have succeeded on that front. During the company's Q3 earnings call, the company said that according to Edison Research and its own internal sources, it recently became the number one podcasting platform for U.S. listeners. Given the U.S. is the largest global podcast market, the milestone is significant and speaks to the sizable investment Spotify has made in podcasts over the past few years. The company didn't break down its podcast listener numbers specifically, however. Instead, it shared its monthly active users overall. According to recent data, Spotify and Apple Podcasts have been neck and neck in terms of U.S. podcast listeners. reached for comment, Edison Research confirmed the podcast milestone is based on usage, not downloads. The data from the firm's second quarter podcast consumer tracker, its subscriber service that covers the podcast industry, Spotify attributed its podcast listener growth not only to its content slate, but also to its product improvements. We started our journey 3 years ago in podcasting with a catalog of about 185,000 podcasts, and we were really nowhere compared to the largest players in the industry. Today we have 3.2 million podcasts on the platform, a growth rate of over 1,500%. That's 15x, noted Spotify CEO Daniel Ek. In the prior quarter, Spotify had 2.9 million podcasts. So they added about 400,000 podcasts in the last 3 months. So why did we succeed this fast? Well, obviously our content investments have helped a great deal, says Ek. But it's also another proof point that the impact our platform improvements and product innovations are having on business overall and the velocity of shipping matters, from the recent launch of interactivity and enhancements like polls and Q&A to the release of enhanced listening features and new original programming around the world. We fought hard to gain new listeners, and our success is not attributable to just one thing, but literally hundreds, if not thousands, of improvements that we're working on in parallel for the benefit of creators, users, and advertisers alike. Daniel Ek said the company's culture of innovation, which leads to an improved user experience, brings more creators to the platform to share their content. This in turn brings more advertisers. And all of these things coupled together, users, creators, and advertisers unlock the power of our flywheel, he says. Yep, he's exactly right. As if you're using Spotify as a podcaster, you get access to a whole bunch of crazy cool data that you do not get by just using Apple.
Tyler, as you know, metrics for podcasts are really notoriously suspect.
Yeah.
It is like very difficult to tell what they mean, whether you go by downloads or full downloads or half downloads. It's hard to tell whether these are automatically downloaded and never listened to, or how far along somebody listened before they stopped. So really, the only thing that matters is availability of content. If you can go to Apple and get any podcast that's out there, that's as good as if you can go to Spotify and find any podcast that's out there. So I don't know if usage really means anything here.
Yeah, you're right. It's tricky. I mean, there's a similar issue with YouTube videos, but YouTube has an advantage in that you're watching YouTube on YouTube, and they have a much better view into how much of the content you consumed. In a podcast, if you download the file, generally they don't know how much you listen to. Spotify is a bit different, because if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify's app, the green app, similar to YouTube, they do know how much of the audio they listen to, and that's given them a bit of an asymmetrical advantage in the measurement of the content that was consumed, and how much some podcasts people don't listen very long, and they don't listen to the whole podcast, and they're starting to have an advantage in collecting the data similar to YouTube. And but you're right, podcasts kind of fall somewhere in between newspapers and magazines, where it's utterly impossible to know how much of the magazine or the newspaper people are consuming, and something like YouTube videos, where they know with total transparency how much of the video you're consuming. So
I think if they host the audio, then they do have an advantage.
Precisely.
Because Apple does not host the audio.
Precisely.
But they also, but Spotify also accepts podcasts that are hosted elsewhere. And in fact, the fact that they got all this number of podcasts available is because they make it really easy. You just put the RSS feed in their feed, and boom, you're done.
Yes.
And then they do so I suspect that most of the podcasts are not hosted by Spotify.
Well, that's why they bought that Anchor app, which
is one of the main ones.
Yes, which is just totally brilliant and genius. Like, you just upload your file to Anchor, you can edit it, then blast it out to the major podcasting platforms, and it tracks all of the data across all of the channels and gives you all of this amazing aggregate data, and it shows you how many of your listeners are on Apple versus Google versus Spotify versus all the other platforms, and demographic data, where the listeners are from, their male, female, country demographics, age demographics, for free. Holy shit, how cool is this? And some of the newest features that Daniel just mentioned in this blog post is the ability to ask questions to your audience in text in the middle of the podcast, like put little surveys in your podcast. And they're now adding the advertising component. So just like YouTube videos, as a YouTuber, you can turn on ads at the beginning or middle of or end of your YouTube videos. You're now going to be able to do the same for your podcast, to monetize your podcasts. And they'll ask you, do you want to monetize this podcast and put ads into it? Holy cow, Apple does not offer that yet. No doubt they're going to have to do that. But Spotify's got a bit of an advantage on this point, because not only do they have podcasts, they have Spotify Music, and they're really building out a robust ad network, which we talked about in our last meeting 12 hours ago, where I really think that the Spotify ad network, where advertisers can advertise on Spotify and target people based on interesting, demographic data, like their age, all of the normal demographic data, plus, I want to target people who listen to Taylor Swift, who are young girls in California who, use an iPhone, et cetera, and get more and more granular. It's that granularity that brings real value to the ad network for advertisers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So in Spotify,
I think, in fact, anyone who's actually done the advertising, and I have a few times, if you actually try to advertise on Facebook and then on Twitter and then on Spotify and then you just will see why the money is going where it's going.
Right.
Because nobody can touch Facebook.
Right.
It's like the way you can slice and dice, it's unreal.
Right. Precisely.
And I think Spotify is way ahead of Apple when it comes to this sort of...
Correct. Yeah. And that's the point. Exactly, well said. Which is, Spotify knows that they need to build out this robust ad network. They are building it out. And where it gets crazy interesting very quickly is Spotify recently has patents around the ability to listen to your environment. They know you're in a cafe, they know you're in a gym, and they can use that data. So you, as a marketer, can say, I want to target only people who are in a gym. I only want my ad to play while somebody's in a cafe. Or they also, as part of that same patent, are able to detect your mood. Holy shit. If you are, and your activity, like if you're out jogging, or if you're in a car, or if you're in an elevated happy mood, if you're in a down mood, if you're in this mood or that mood, they're also able to, now here's where it gets crazy, y'all, is should they or should they not be able to listen to your conversations? And then this is where you get utter granularity. If they hear you say the words diapers, should they be able to then use that as part of the ad network, so advertisers can target people who have mentioned the word diapers, for example, or running shoes, or, a Maui vacation. And that level of granularity is the holy grail. And that becomes a privacy issue. And then you're going to say, oh, I don't think they should have that. Well, you clicked I agree, didn't you? You agreed to it when you accepted the terms of the app. The app says, we're going to listen to what you're saying, and we're going to sell that to advertisers. That's why the app's, essentially free. You're the product. And this is basically what Google and Facebook and others have been, and Amazon and Alexa, and why they have all these devices that have all these microphones. This is such a big deal. So what about other apps? Of course, they know how valuable that data is. So anyway.
Tyler, shouldn't the metric that if I was, if you're a shareholder in any of these companies, the metric you'd want to see is how much money whether it's advertising or what you charge for putting your podcast on. How much money does Apple make from its podcast? How much money does Spotify make from its podcast?
Yeah.
That's more important, I think, than how many podcasts itself are on it, or what the listening time. It's like it has to at some point come back to revenues for these companies, and they should be able to figure out how to if they wanted to be more transparent about like how much revenue are we getting out of this, because I'm interested in who's generating the most revenue out of podcasts more than some kind of user number that may not be relevant in terms of whether they're listening to the whole thing or 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, the other interesting thing is Spotify must be covered by I don't know how many sell-side analysts, but Edison Research is sponsored. That's not independent research. That's paid for by the company, which is kind of curious. If there are a lot of independents on the sell side analyzing the company, Spotify chose the sponsored research as the source of the data. One thing I always wondered about is basically, there are microphones which are, made for purpose. So, for instance, in the cell phones, usually it's been used as, electric condenser ones. And if you look at it, like probably Tyler would be using a different one right now in terms of the actual, it's a unidirectional mic, and specifically diaphragm is used for that particular purpose. Now, when we are actually using those phones, how it's been used in a different way that it's actually picking up the noises from the background. It's possible in the Alexa and Google Home devices, because that's how the microphone has been built into those, by keeping in view that there's going to be a background noise and all that. But with the hardware which is actually built into the phones, if they are actually building that technology is purely based on software, that's genius. How is it even possible? Because there are tons of types of microphones that, depending on the diaphragm, depending on the actual unidirectional, how many mics are there within that, and is it a condenser mic? It's just all sorts of different mics, and to actually go for something which is going to actually pick up the background noises and what's happening in the background, it just by itself is it is hardware dependent. So
Annie Q has her hand up, and her bio says she's a tech marketing strategist, so it'd be and a top podcaster. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Annie. I just invited you up on stage here. Your hand was up, and she disappeared. So hopefully she's bouncing out and back in. But we'll wait for that. And while we do, the next headline real quickly is that Google unveils Android 12 L update focused on tablets, foldables, and Chromebooks, which tweaks their big screen user interface layouts, adds a taskbar more, which will be coming in early 2022. And then Samsung has just done their Q3 reports with a net profit of $10 billion, up 31% year over year, with a record revenue of $63 billion, up 10% year over year, beating estimates. Operating profit rose 26%, so the stock should have gone up a bit as a result of that, which is good for the whole basket of tech companies generally. And then the next one is Instagram rolls out link stickers to all users, something they were testing previously on verified and high follower accounts. And so now you can link directly to a website. People have been begging for this in Instagram since Instagram launched. So they call them link stickers. You make a little sticker and you link. The sticker itself can link outside of Instagram, and now everyone can do that. To add a link, head to the sticker tool, and from the top navigation bar, after uploading content to your story, tap the link sticker and enter a desired URL. It then functions like any other sticker on a stories post, but it then links out of the app. Or it might be in the app. They might have built their own little browser inside the Instagram app. That's actually very possible. I don't know which yet. Somebody might know on stage. But It basically lets you include links in your stories, and it's now available to everyone on the platform. Okay, next up is GitHub, which is where developers host all their code that they're working on, and kind of like a big library of code, and they can make their code visible and available and downloadable. And yeah, once their code is finished, it becomes an app essentially, and then you can download apps from GitHub. And some of the coolest apps you will ever find are kind of on GitHub. It's kind of like an app store in a way of a whole bunch of really cool little features, little app features. Anyway, so GitHub says as much as 30% of new code on GitHub is written with its AI tool called Copilot, and 50% of developers who tried it have kept using it. The open source software developer GitHub says as much as 30% of newly written code on its network is being done with the help of the company's AI programming tool called Copilot. So they're very happy about the results of that. It's making coding, removing more of the boundaries of writing code. And the implication here is huge. The implication is that, and I think developers are willing to acknowledge this in some sense, that in our lifetimes, that the AI will really eventually, we're going to keep innovating until it's just magical and people can create web content and app content and etc. through AIs in a very magical way, where you need to know very little coding essentially, and it will become more of a relationship where you'll say what you want and the computer will say, is this what you wanted? You'll say, no, not like that, do it like this, blah 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 blah, and it'll become much more human friendly. The whole endeavor of coding will continue to become more and more and more user friendly. That's been true from the beginning anyways, but we're now starting to see a tipping point. We're starting to get quite impressively more human friendly when you start having AIs being your co-pilot in the code writing.
A question here is how readable and maintainable is the code that the AI is writing? Because it is gibberish, so you can't maintain it as a human, and then something goes wrong, and the AI can't solve it, and you can't read the code because it's written in machine language, to use that terminology. Have anybody been looking at the code it actually generates?
Great question.
Is it possible to maintain it?
Right.
Maintain it manually?
Let's bring Carl up. He might have dabbled with it already.
Yeah, he would know more. But in some cases you can. But in some cases, even if you can read the code, you can't understand the algorithm. And if you think of all the set of algorithms that exist in the universe, there are those that are machine understandable but not human understandable.
Exactly what I was aiming for. The thing is here that, yeah, you can generate code, but you can't maintain it.
It's a great point.
You can do a proof of concept. Yeah, we can solve this thing. Now we need to set the real guys on it, because it's actually the AI can solve it, but we can't read what it does. And the thing is, how do you quality assure this one? How do you do the things we as a security experts want to do? We want to read the code and understand if there are any loopholes, if there are any possible leaks, if there are any possible ways to do SQL injections, for example. If we can't look into the code and understand it, this is probably useless. You undone.
It's a great point. Did Carl accept the invitation? If not, we'll wait and then circle back to Annie. Welcome. And did you have your hand up related to the podcasting and marketing and stuff?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on the stage. My signal wasn't very great. I was just curious because I think that's a fantastic way of doing advertisement, but Spotify also has a requirement of at least spending $250 on advertisement. So it does have a minimum requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder who is willing to do advertisement, at least spending $250 to test it out. And if they advertise people based on location, I personally, I'm a Spotify listener, and they target me when I'm hiking. I'm basically in a very different mood. I might be enjoying my life and relaxed. It might bother me, whatever advertisements they're offering. So I'm just wondering.
It's a great point. And
what's your opinion on?
You perfectly touched on why they patented this idea of wanting to know your mood and where you are, because as an advertiser, I don't want to market to you when you're trying to fall asleep. And Spotify can know that you're trying to fall asleep. And I don't want to, I want to know, are you at work? Because maybe I'm trying to sell, productivity tools. And I want to target you while you're at work. Or I'm targeting some health related thing and I want to target you while you're at the gym. That's where that's why this is so genius, by the way, because the other ad networks currently don't have that functionality, and that so many advertisers will jump all over that, because if I have a hot new, weight loss product, I want to target you when you're at the gym, and no other ad network currently lets me do that. And then they would get, you can understand how powerful that is. Targeting people based on what activity they're doing is totally genius for an ad network.
I think from their standpoint, I would think the same. But if I'm at the gym, I'm at the time, I'm very private and I want to relax and focus on my exercise. If they play an ad at that point, it brings my concern of, being violated of my privacy, rather than I want to listen to that ad. Even though I'm in the marketing business and I want to use many marketing channels, but just don't want to get some opinion.
Yeah, and then Data, who's on stage, just shared a really relevant link about the accelerometer, because the accelerometer essentially is the sensor / piece of hardware that enables this ability to sense, what kind of activity you're doing, if you're jogging or, sleeping or whatnot. So, Data, if you could comment on that and how apps are using the accelerometer and how that relates to, people's privacy.
Yes, absolutely. So the link that I just put out is from a company that was security researchers that were studying privacy and data sovereignty, and of course they started studying the iPhone and the persistent analysis of the accelerometer data from the apps. And so what they were able to do is they were actually able to recognize speech based on the sound vibrations generated by the phone speaker.
Holy shit.
Yep. It specifically says they just, I don't know, actually I'm going to quote it really quickly. It says, they just read and analyzed data from the phone accelerometer without having access to the microphone.
Wow.
Yes. And it's all published as well. So these are the kinds of things that I'm actually teaching, around the world to human rights defenders, so that we can understand the kind of data that's actually being extracted from these devices. It's a really, really amazing research done. I don't know if you can tweet it out, but so people can see it. But actually, I'll put it in my profile too.
Yeah, put it at maybe in a recent tweet from your Twitter account, so people can go to your Twitter account. See this? I'm looking at the video now, and there was a headline yesterday of a team from Italy and UC Berkeley, University of Rome, and University of California, Irvine, actually, that says don't Skype and type, because they have been able to detect with 97.1% accuracy what key somebody is pressing on a keyboard over a Skype call. By the sound of the key, they can predict with 97.1% accuracy which key on the keyboard you're pressing, meaning they can determine your passwords if you're typing passwords during a Skype call without seeing the keyboard.
It's called acoustic cryptanalysis.
My God. I really support the conversation about advertising going in the direction that we're talking about now, of privacy, and educating the population on the price of tomorrow of creating these massive data sets of ourselves. And I just think that this alternative view of the web, for example, Small Step, the Brave browser, which also has an advertising system, but it's meant where the user can control their data sets better, or streaming sats to podcasts to pay for content providers, things like this.
Yeah, it's getting wild. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, quickly, I just wanted to ask Data. This, if you look at the simplistic feed from the accelerometer, which is coming in, and we actually did that like a little bit work when I was looking into actually making sense of the data. That if you have the phone in your pocket, let's say you're wearing jeans and you have your phone is in your right pocket. And then we try to actually access it, like in terms of if you're bending down, if you're actually jumping, if you're doing jogging, if you're doing certain exercises. I mean, it is so much data actually sort of like comes out of the accelerometer that it's really hard to actually make sense of it. So how that is being translated into, because there's so much processing power needs to be involved in that if you are actually making any sense of the accelerometer data. So, I mean, can you shed some more light on that how it's been done?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually going to just take a screenshot from my terminal because I'm working with several several big entities to release new Pegasus spyware identification software. I've reached out to Citizen Lab. I've been in contact with them to validate my code. And one of the big things that I'm actually going to be focusing on is accelerometer data. So I'm actually going to tweet this out real quick and put this on the so you can see just kind of and this is actually the code, and what I'm actually saying right now is live on GitHub, but the methodology is not available. So this is something you can actually see in my GitHub. It's my pinned tweet. But yes, this accelerometer data is being used everywhere, right? So geofencing, understanding your geolocation based on accelerometer data, heart, your heart rhythm, pulses, health, your health data all goes through the accelerometer of your phone.
Well,
I mean, there's just so much.
Yeah, to unpack that, it says here, I just tweeted the video out because I just got done watching it. It's fucking amazing. It says, by monitoring the accelerometer data, it can infer location without having access to GPS.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that geofencing, exactly.
Yeah, you just said that, but I wanted to put it in more simplified English for the non-geeks. But that's
perfect.
It's freaking wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, I bought a.
It's crazy how there's just so much involved.
It explains it here because it says, imagine this scenario: you're riding on a bus with a passenger, and the passenger is sharing their location with an app. Like, for example, lots of apps want to know your location data all the time. Google, Facebook, pretty much all of them. They all want to know your location data. And you say, you know what? No, I like my privacy. I'm going to turn my location data off. Right. However, that person sitting next to you on the bus does have their accelerometer on, and that's very normal, and so do you. Your accelerometer and their accelerometer, because you both have your phones in your pockets, is nearly identical. And because of that, they can now infer your location. You're sitting next to this person because you have identical accelerometer data going on.
Well, you also have a Bluetooth network that might be connected to your neighbor.
Sure. But even if you think you're using incredible privacy hygiene by turning off, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi so that people wouldn't know where you are, even if your accelerometer's on, that could infer location. I had never thought of that.
But
I have a
Tyler, my
question.
point was like, I mean, it's so much data. I mean, although it's in bits, but I mean, to make sense out of it, that what exactly is happening in terms of movement, is just like next to impossible. Because you know, imagine there's like if you're geofencing, and there's like probably 1,500 devices in a particular location, like by 500 square meters. I mean, there's going to be tons of data coming out, which is going to be going into, and if you're looking at going into the cloud and processing that information and get the meaning out of it. I mean, it's just so impossible to actually sort of like make the sense out of it, what exactly is happening. That's
I
what
can
I
say
wanted to actually get to, that, I mean, how they are actually making sense of any X, Y, Z axis from the accelerometer, that's really challenging. But
But it
anyway.
ties back to the device ID and the SIM card.
so Apple actually already has a program that does this, and it's called Power Warrior X. It's an internal application, and so right now I'm working with someone to actually essentially create our own Power Warrior X, so that you can actually see what it looks like. I'm going to tweet this out real quick too, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. This is actually an internal tool, but so I'm taking a screenshot. But yeah, we're in the process of creating our own analyzer, just like you're saying, because it is quite challenging to analyze this data and make sense of it. But since we do know that Apple has this, and I just tweeted it, so you can actually see what it looks like. You can actually see how detailed we can actually get to the second of when things are happening. So sleep wake times, logging, accelerometers, Bluetooth wakings, everything that you could imagine has already been created by them. So yes, you're right in the sense that it is tough, but again, it is already been done.
So effectively, what it means that they are doing all the processing on the device itself, and you don't know. Basically, your processing power is being used by them, in fact, and that's like gruesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to the other headlines here going on. Internal documents show that Netflix tried to minimize public backlash to the film Cuties by stopping it from appearing in some search results and recommendations. Yeah, okay. I guess that's news. Netflix scrambled internally to suppress a controversial movie from search results. You're trying to turn this is just you're clickbaiting, Verge. You got to knock this nonsense off. This is not as salacious as you're making it out to be here. Basically, they had a movie called Cuties, which was very well received at film festivals. It's a French film. It did very well at Sundance, for example, even in the US. And a poster for the film came out by, the director, the filmmaker put out a poster, and the poster for the film has nothing to do with Netflix, for example, right? So the poster is, because if you've ever lived in France, you can see a whole lot of stuff on French billboards that would shock even Americans, and especially Swedes. And I've even tweeted out some of my favorite French billboards, because it's incredibly different than anything you will ever see on billboards in Scandinavia or the US. They get very sexualized in their adverts in France. And the French have a very different, comfortability with those types of, billboards and ads and whatever. So this French film made a very French-like poster for the film, which people really objected to, found very distasteful, where it had very young girls, like 12 years old, wearing booty shorts and crop tops, striking provocative dance poses. And so, people were getting angry about the film and the poster, and of course, with their kind of unfocused rage, because Netflix had the film, they're channeling their, unbridled rage towards Netflix, for example. So Netflix made it, removed the film from the upcoming film section of Netflix. When you go into Netflix, there's a coming soon section and a popular searches section. So they removed that film, which is called Cuties, from the coming soon section so that you wouldn't see it unless you were really looking for it. They also removed it from the popular searches section, again, so that you wouldn't find it unless you actually tried to find it. You have to go out of your way to find this film on Netflix. You have to actually type in the actual name of the movie into the search bar to find it. They even removed, if you searched for the word cute, because the name of the film is Cuties, if you search for the word cute, well, you might not be intentionally trying to find this film, and they don't want you to accidentally find this film. So you have to actually type the actual name of the film correctly and not some other similar word like the word cute, because they don't want kids typing in the word cute being exposed to this film. So, again, that's what happened. Netflix changed things around a little bit. Took them all of about, 3 minutes to remove the film from the coming soon section and the popular searches sections and remove it from related search terms like the word cute so that only people who were really intending to find it would find it. Big whoop, right? Big wow, holy cow. And then the headline from The Verge is Netflix scrambled internally to suppress controversial movie from search results. Okay, I guess, yep. Scrambled, yep. Took them about, 2 minutes to make those changes. It took one person at Netflix 2 minutes to do exactly what I described, about as long as it took me to describe it. The streaming giant kept Cuties from appearing in some search results and recommendations after backlash to the poster. Yep. And why is this news exactly? It says, in September 2020, Netflix was in turmoil as the company battled its most significant PR scandal to date. What the fuck are you talking about, Verge? You got to stop with this nonsense. I understand you're desperate for clicks. You're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. This is just really stupid journalism to be doing this. This is you're approaching tabloidism. This is like Area 51, like alien, lady gives birth to 5-headed twins or some shit like this. You got to knock this nonsense off. This is like the National Enquirer. This is almost like QAnon, like, child molesters in a pizza parlor bullshit. You just knock this nonsense off. This is not turmoil, scandal, biggest PR scandal of the company's history. This is, oh dear Lord. It says,
but Tyler,
yes.
Verge is always borderlining, like pretty much on the tabloidism. It's always been that's what we actually place in the whole, tech news and everything else. That's where they are.
Sensationalizing. Anyway.
Exactly.
Okay. So anyway, this is why we have to do tech news around the world, so that we can call out all of this ridiculous non-journalism that everyone's engaged in here. So, okay. So, I'm now, Jesus. The original picture on the French version, they could have just used this picture instead of removing the movie. Yeah, I'm now seeing the picture of the movie here, and I will tweet out this photo to the Tech News Twitter account so you can see this holy cow, unimaginable shock and awe horror of a movie poster here, and you can decide for yourself just how truly egregious this is. So here it comes. There it goes to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. Now,
Tyler, I read the news. I think maybe because of the term they said, they protest its pedophilia.
Yep.
So I think this word is very strong in Western world.
Yep.
So.
Very much so, yes. So the next headline is a company called Skyrise, which develops a flight automation operating system called Flight OS, raises $200 million. A 5-year-old startup, Skyrise, has raised $200 million for flight automation operating system, and we are going to need that for all of the vertical takeoff and landing electric vehicles, aka sky taxis, aka sky cars, aka I don't care what we call them, I just want one now. And it makes sense. You're going to need an operating system for these autonomous vertical takeoff and landing electric vehicles. So that's why this company just raised $200 million for that. Next up, Wall Street Journal says a look at Stripe's carbon removal investments, including $9 million in 10 projects. Nearly 9,000 businesses use Stripe Climate to divert some revenue to carbon removal. It says the technology for removing billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere isn't ready. Stripe wants to speed things up. Indeed, and this is an incredibly cool initiative that Stripe is working on here, where it says Stripe is signing up to pay for carbon removal technologies that haven't been invented yet. The payments company has formed a partnership with Deep Science Ventures, a London investment firm that specializes in building technology companies from the ground up. Deep Science Ventures will recruit scientists to develop ways to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If they come up with viable concepts, Stripes will be their first customer. It will pay the company and the startups $500,000 each up front to capture and store carbon, then a further $1 million if they meet performance milestones. It's a bit of like a miniature X Prize, essentially. Here's the quote from Stripe's head of climate. There are just too few companies that are even attempting to build permanent carbon removal at the scale needed, and we need more shots on goal. Indeed. And why not do massive bamboo farming? Dropping bamboo seeds from airplanes. Let's carpet bomb the planet in the bamboo belt. Cover the planet in bamboo in about, 6 months. And that will actually end climate change. Because that bamboo will continuously draw down carbon from the atmosphere, all of the carbon that's in the atmosphere and any additional carbon that we might generate henceforward. It's totally doable. No technology necessary. The next one is Intel launches its 12th generation Alder Lake chips. Who cares? Next one. Wall Street Journal says they have sources that the Department of Justice is investigating whether Visa, the credit card company, used financial incentives to keep Square, Stripe, and PayPal from using other card networks or payment systems, and that's what you call abusing your market position. Some might even say monopoly, although a duopoly that they share with MasterCard. So now Visa is in the crosshairs of the Justice Department as the Justice Department probes Visa's relationships with fintech firms. Antitrust investigators are scrutinizing financial incentives Visa gave to Square, Stripe, and PayPal. Oh boy. Visa is publicly traded. They're down 7% yesterday as a result of this headline. The Justice Department is scrutinizing Visa's relationship with large financial technology companies as part of its antitrust investigation of the card giant, according to people familiar with the matter. Antitrust investigators are looking into the financial incentives that Visa gave Square, Stripe, and PayPal. Investigators want to know if those deals kept the payments firms from using other card networks, meaning are they exclusive deals? Did Visa say, hey, we have a deal for you. It's a sweetheart deal. However, you must use Visa exclusively. And if they did that, that will get them in deep shit. And that's what they're going to try and find out. They want to know if those deals kept payment firms from using other card networks or money movement technologies. The probe is part of an existing antitrust investigation that the Wall Street Journal previously reported. There is no indication that the department has reached any conclusions or is nearing the end of its probe. To send transactions over Visa's rails, fintech firms pay fees that Visa sets. Some fintech companies enable payments that bypass Visa and other major credit card networks. For example, some allow payments to travel from one bank to another without using card rails. Visa at times has offered to lower fees or give other rewards in exchange for fintech firms sending more transactions over Visa rails rather than other networks or technologies. Okay, that sounds like a clever way to incentivize without doing the illegal stuff. I imagine that's what they're doing. Separately, investigators are looking into a deal Visa struck roughly 6 years ago related to Square's Cash App. According to people familiar with the matter, Cash App lets people send money digitally to each other. Square was working with networks, including Visa and lesser-known companies, to route these transactions, people said. Visa bought a stake in Square about a decade ago when it was a small startup, and that's probably the best thing Visa has done in the past decade. Visa offered to lower fees for Square and to send performance payments to the company that would get bigger when Square sent more transactions over Visa, people familiar with the matter said. That resulted in Square using Visa for many of its Cash App transactions, some of the people said. The Department of Justice's antitrust investigation is also examining whether Visa unfairly limited merchants from routing. No, they're not limiting anything. They're incentivizing the app to use Visa more. So if anyone does anything wrong, it's the startup by shifting more of the traffic to Visa. Visa is purely incentivizing them to do that, and it's up to them if they do it. Here's a quote. We believe Visa's U.S. debit practices are in compliance with applicable laws, because they went to their lawyers and said, hey, here's what we have in mind for how to incentivize fintech startups to use Visa more. If they use us more, we give them a lower rate. Is that compliant with the laws? Dear lawyers, please analyze. The lawyers did their lawyering, and they said, yeah, according to the law, you can incentivize people to use your products. That doesn't force them. You're not forcing them to not use your competitors' products. End of discussion. Department of Justice, I just did your analysis for you. You can now end the investigation.